Hello, I'm Logan.
And I'm Lexi.
And this is Pride and Prejudice, the podcast talking all things pride, but mainly we're talking about the T in LGBT. Episode 2. Today we're talking about the surgery. For those of you who don't know what I'm referencing, that's an Instagram meme.
Yeah, so there's a couple of videos by trans filmmaker Lewis Hancock's, which just kind of parodying people's assumptions about the surgery.
Just to clarify at the start of the episode, not every trans person gets surgery, but both Lexi and I have had a couple of surgeries. You know, that one big common misconception is that it's one big surgery that changes everything. No, there's a few. You don't have to get all of them. You don't have to get any of them. But we're going to be talking about some common myths with surgery, along with our personal experiences. So, common myths, I think the number one common thing is that hormones and surgery are easy to get. They absolutely are not. I see a lot of people arguing this point. Oh, it's so easy to get. People are being like... jumping through the system, and then they'll regret it because they haven't thought about it, because they go to the doctor, they say they're trans, and they're like, cool, have surgery next week. That's absolutely not what happens. And same with hormones, because even if you have been sure that you're trans for several years, the NHS waiting lists are incredibly long. And if you go private, the prices are incredibly high, which is a thing that does need to change. I'm not necessarily suggesting that someone gets surgery after their first doctor's appointment talking about whether or not they're trans. I just think, for some people, they wait 5 years on the waiting list just for their first appointment at the GIC. So talking about their feelings and thinking that they might be trans and what are the next steps to take. 5 years for that's just too long. What are you supposed to do in that time? Especially if you don't have a supportive network.
So by the way, GIC stands for Gender Identity Clinic, and that's kind of the NHS route in this country. Certainly for me, my first referral to the GIC, I attempted to make when I was 19. And I didn't get hormones until I was 29. So there you go.
For me, it was a little bit different because I went privately, which I am fortunate enough to have been able to do. I know that's not an option for everyone. It does cost a lot of money. And even though I went privately, it still took maybe 3 years for me to get on hormones. And even, when you've been approved for hormones, there's still so many steps, talking about the dosage, how you're feeling now that you're on hormones, whether or not to increase or decrease the dosage. You have to get constant blood tests to keep everyone, all the medical professionals in check. Sometimes they don't get back to you in time, which can be really frustrating in certain cases because, not messing with your hormones, but anything you do that changes your hormones in any way, this happens to some people when they go on menopause, when they go through menopause, not on menopause, or going through puberty, for the first time in our cases, it's going to be a difficult journey emotionally. And when your medication gets messed up or people don't respond to you in time, that does have negative consequences.
Yeah, I think certainly for us or for trans people, the negativity isn't necessarily in that you're taking hormones, it's that they aren't being properly monitored, or you're kind of left to figure it out yourself, when really there should be more support in place for
that. So another common thing to talk about is about kids getting surgery or kids going on hormones. First, you kind of have to clarify what you mean by kids, because when transphobes say it, they tend to mean 5-year-olds. And when you really think about it, a 5-year-old is not going to go on hormones. They haven't gone through puberty yet. And a 5-year-old can't really get surgery because, well, they especially can't get top surgery, which is removing of the breast tissue, because there's nothing to remove yet. They haven't grown. So no, children don't get surgery and they don't get hormones. If you're talking kids maybe towards 11 or 12 when puberty starts happening, they can have the option to go on puberty blockers, so that is also a very difficult thing to get, especially nowadays since people are trying to put restrictions on it. Even though hormone blockers have been a thing like since the 80s, what it basically does is that it delays puberty. And it was initially, and still is, prescribed to cis children when they start puberty too early. But as soon as it was prescribed to trans children to delay puberty, then people start having a massive problem about it. You know, it's like the Joker meme. Everyone starts losing their freaking minds. Another thing to keep in mind is that hormone blockers are reversible. If you stop taking them, then puberty just happens as it would have done if you didn't take them. You know, there's no long-term effects or short-term effects. So there really is no harm in going on them.
Yeah, I mean, even as an adult who's on hormone blockers, like, I can really tell when mine's wearing off. So it's kind of, it only blocks it for the time that you're on it. So for trans young people, it's really just gives them time to kind of not be uncomfortable with puberty, and then, you know, a few years later they can figure out what hormones they want to go on, or if they just want to go off the blockers. So it's not putting people straight on hormones.
Another thing that people talk about is, even though it's not the case when it comes to transitioning with hormone blockers, is, oh, they can't be making permanent changes at such a young age. But what they don't think about is when you don't go on hormone blockers and you are trans, you do get permanent effects that will affect you for the rest of your life because you went through puberty. Well, because you went through the puberty that wasn't correct for you. So in my case, my chest grew, which I had to remove with surgery. The surgery. And if I was on hormone blockers when I was younger, that surgery wouldn't have needed to have taken place at all. But some other things is that my hips, my bone structure in the hips have grown. That's not something that can be fixed now. But I think the permanent changes when it comes to going through puberty, without going on puberty blockers, kind of affects trans women a little bit more. There's more things that permanently affect that.
Yeah, so for me, like, I can't, the hormones that I'm on now don't really affect, say, my facial hair or my voice. So at the moment, I'm going through electrolysis, which is kind of removing the hairs one by one, and very painful. And that takes a long time as well. And for my voice, I recently had surgery, so I'm still, this isn't even my final form. I don't know what I'm going to sound like, but yeah, it's healing at the moment. But that was more of a sort of, because my pitch dropped, and, you know, you can raise it with voice training, speech and language therapy, but that doesn't always go far enough. But it is an option that a lot of people take, majority of trans women probably, but it's pretty difficult as
well. So another term that annoyingly gets thrown around is that we're grooming children because we're exposing them to topics like this at a young age, which I think is a really disgusting word to use, because grooming is a really serious issue that does deserve to be talked about. For those of you who don't know, grooming is essentially when an adult sort of influences a child at a young age to believe things or do things they might not be comfortable or might not understand what they're doing because they're so young. It's most commonly used when an adult is trying to have a relationship with the child and trying to sort of lure them in at a young age. So even if they do get into a relationship with the child and the child is now an adult, the child has been groomed their whole life to think something different and to be lured into a relationship. which is, that's a completely different issue. I don't know why that term is being thrown around with the LGBT Q community.
So we were trans children, so we kind of know what it feels like and what it felt like. And we could certainly have done, I think, with more education and positive representation into it, because it's kind of alienating if you're growing up like that and you're not really learning about what's going on with you. So I think it helps more than anything else. It's not grooming for someone to tell you that something exists. It's just life.
Yeah, people will be like, oh, they shouldn't be learning about these subjects in school. We're real people. We're outside. We're in public. Whether you like it or not. Like, all you're doing by not letting them learn about these subjects is that, like, I mean, you'll probably be making them more confused than by teaching them the subjects, like, and people just assume it is a sexual thing, and that's really on them, because it isn't a sexual thing to talk about who you like or who you are. Which is why people throw around the term grooming, because they say it's exposing kids to sexual content at a young age, which it really isn't. It's basically saying these people exist. Some people are like this, some people are like this. It might be the case that you are like this, and if you feel this way, maybe you should talk to someone. That's basically all it is. And if we had stuff like that growing up, we might have found things out earlier, and we might have felt more comfortable within ourselves and our feelings earlier. And then people say, oh, drag is sexual, there shouldn't be drag at Pride, kids shouldn't be going to drag, there shouldn't be drag story hours. It's a person dressed up. Like, you see that everywhere. And yes, there are drag performances that are 18 plus, but there's a reason they're 18 plus. Children don't go to those ones. Just because someone can do two things doesn't mean they do two things at the same time. What's wrong with someone dressed up reading someone's stories, children's stories even? If they have questions, cool. They have questions. They should ask questions. So, going into personal experiences, the only surgery that's trans-related that I've had is top surgery, which is basically a double mastectomy, removing the breast tissue. And luckily for me, I had a really positive experience, as most people do. Obviously, there are complications, as there are with every surgery, and there are regret rates, as there are with every surgery. But for me, I had a bit of a wobble getting the surgery, which is kind of what we were talking about accessibility. I kind of got tossed around different clinics, different doctors, mainly because of my medical conditions that are sort of outside of the scope. They were worried they wouldn't be able to treat me with the sort of medical conditions I had. So I eventually had my surgery done in Plymouth, and I had a really positive experience. I found that the staff were very nice. They explained the whole process to me. Before the surgery, during the surgery, and after the surgery, they were there for me. They made me feel sort of comfortable with what I was going through. Even though I already was comfortable with what I was going through, I decided that this was right for me ages ago, and getting the actual surgery was just the process of getting the thing I wanted done. Luckily for me, I have a very supportive network. My mum was there for every stage of this. I also had my girlfriend with me when I had the surgery, and they both came with me for pre-appointments and post-appointments. And having that support really is helpful, because going through any surgery for whatever reason is stressful. It's a lot of things to consider. Going under anesthesia can have a lot of effects, especially immediately afterwards. But the process of getting the surgery was a bit... because I went private, it wasn't as difficult as it could have been. But I needed 2 diagnoses of gender dysphoria, which is the medical term for being transgender. It's a medical condition.
Although you don't have to have dysphoria to be trans.
Yes, correct. What we mean by gender dysphoria is essentially when parts of your body that sort of represent the gender you were given at birth make you feel uncomfortable, ill, upset, depressed. Some people get it mixed up with dysmorphia, which is being upset with your body for how it looks. It might be because you're not happy with your weight, or maybe you have scars. That falls under dysmorphia. Dysphoria is sort of when it relates to gender specifically.
Yeah, and it can be social, so it's not necessarily all about your body, but it's more of a feeling.
So I needed a diagnosis of gender dysphoria because it was relevant to getting surgery. For me, going private for my surgery felt like the only option. I was fortunate enough to be able to do it. But I could not stand living with my chest for longer than I already had been. It really impacted every day. I could always feel it. It affected what clothes I wore, where I went. Summer especially affected it because I had to constantly layer up, and that's not always the best thing to do in the sun. Also binding. Which, for those of you who don't know, binding is essentially wearing something tight over your chest that flattens it, which you can only do for a certain amount of hours. And also when you do it, it's very tight and uncomfortable. And then when you take it off, suddenly you're flooded with dysphoria again. And I just could not continue living that way. It was making me incredibly depressed. It made me not want to go outside. So my dysphoria diagnoses basically highlighted that the surgery was medically necessary, and the doctors agreed that it was medically necessary. So I was able to go through with it. And I've had surgery before for something not trans related, and I remember waking up feeling like really dizzy and awful, and as most people do when they wake up for surgery. But I will never forget that feeling that I had when I woke up from top surgery, and I looked down at my chest and it was flat, and there was just this huge wave of relief. Like, I cannot describe it. I could not stop smiling. I was just like, oh my god, that's what my chest looks like now. That's what it's always going to look like. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe I'm here. I can't believe I'm fortunate enough to be here. I want to see my girlfriend. I was just... Oh my god, I was so happy throughout the whole process, and then coming out in recovery, which still sucked. Recovery does suck, but on the mental side of everything and getting that surgery, for me, it was absolutely the right decision, and I still haven't quite gotten over it, really. I only had the surgery a few months ago, but I still can't stop thinking about it now and again when I catch myself in a mirror, or I find a shirt that fits me now. I'm like, oh my god, that's because I had surgery. Oh, that's going to be that way for the rest of my life. I can't believe it. On the sensory side, because I'm also autistic, I found binding to be the most negatively sensory impacting experience in the world. For whatever reason, binders are not made with the best material on the inside. It feels like wearing a swimming costume made out of sandpaper. It is absolutely atrocious, and towards the end of me binding, I didn't really wear ones that were very tight. My binders were very loose, so they changed the shape of my chest, but they didn't compress it, which meant I could wear binders all the time safely. But it was just absolutely awful, and I couldn't feel what my shirts felt like because it was always obscured by this horrible binder thing. And then after I got top surgery, I still had to bind for a couple of weeks because I had these post-surgery bandages on, and as soon as they were off, and I could feel the material of my shirts, oh my god, it was amazing, and it still feels amazing. I just kept trying on all these different t-shirts, all the ones made out of different materials, being like, oh, I can feel this now. And it was absolutely amazing. And that's called euphoria.
So I only had a surgery a few weeks ago, so still healing. I had voice surgery, or the specific one is modified ventriculoplasty, and it's to do with the vocal cords, basically. Because my voice dropped in my teens, and that was always a source of dysphoria for me. I think even before it happened, because I was like dreading it. And I have done speech and language therapy as well, but that only went so far with me. Like, at the moment, this is maybe the highest that my voice could get before surgery, but that was with a lot of effort. I don't have to put much effort into it now, even if I do sound very hoarse at the moment, but that's because it's still healing. But it's definitely been, I woke up like you did, Logan, like just really happy, even though I couldn't immediately kind of see or hear the effects of it, because I had to not talk for a week. But yeah, I was just really happy.
Yeah, I remember that recovery period, because I was with you through that. Yeah, you couldn't say anything for a week, so it was a lot of charades, text-to-speech, but you also couldn't laugh, which was difficult for me, because I can make you laugh even without trying most of the time. So that was interesting. But then as it was starting to heal, you could say some words per day. And I just found it really interesting which words you decided were important enough to say at times. Like, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head now. But when you almost made your last word of the day Tesco, because I couldn't understand what you were trying to say, I was like, oh, you want a drink? Okay. Tea? What, you want tea? But you don't drink tea, what do you mean? And then just a very faint little Tesco. And then I was like, wait, was that 30 words? And you were like, shit.
I didn't say that out loud.
No. That would have been ironic though. You'd be like, oh, 31. Oh no. You just keep going down the rabbit hole.
Thanks for listening to the Pride and Prejudice podcast.
And be sure to check out the other episodes.
Bye.
Bye.